Welcome to Testimony Mountain. It's always a joy to be here with Jessie. And
Okay.
I know we've got you have some events coming up and we have some mutual events coming up. So if you want to just share briefly about that before we launch in.
Yeah, definitely. We have the first one up. Let me just quick pull up so I got them all right here. Um, I want to first encourage people. I've got my new book is out,
Yes, that's it.
Foundations of Kingdom Living, and all of this stuff you can find on my website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. So right front and center, you'll see the book there, and then the events I have first is gonna be the Eyes Wide Open, which is in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, and that's March 23rd and 24th. And then back to back, we'll be doing an amazing decode, which will include a tour of the Capitol there in Austin, Texas, and that's March 28th through the 30th. And I don't know if, for those who've never been on a live decode tour with me, I really encourage you to try to connect with one of those because there's so much that you see and learn just in the building structures, the different symbols that are used by the Brotherhood system, and learning how to understand what those symbols mean really helps you to know your area and kind of what the regional strongholds in that area are. The next decode that I'll be doing is April 19th through the 20th, and that will be in St. Augustine, Florida.
Wow.
And that one backs up, um, another mansion museum where I've gone. So I'll be interested to see if I've actually, remembered this place from childhood. I'm pretty positive I have been there.
Mhm.
And, one of the places that kind of mirrors it is, the Flagler Mansion. Um, I think it's in the Palm Beach area.
Interesting.
But there's some of the like Flagler, his home and one of his universities is there. So it'll be really, I know that that's going to be packed with so much. So that's one of the oldest areas in the United States for settlements, I guess. So it'll be very interesting. And supposedly it has the Fountain of Youth, Adina.
Oh, wow. I'm coming on that one now. No. We know the
Maybe
true
we found it. I'm not sure. We'll figure it out.
we know the true fountain of youth is Jesus. Well, sounds like a lot of amazing things coming up, and definitely encourage people to get your book as well and go deep. Good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yep. Good stuff. So, yep. It backs up. It's actually a complementary to the course. So, if you want the real extensive information, that's going to be in the Foundation of Kingdom Living course.
Mhm.
And then that's a series. So, then you have the Rise of the Righteous and the Beautifully Adorned is the third in that series. So,
That is so awesome. All right. Well, we are going to explore. Last time we were together, we looked at Head Start and some of the things around that. And there was some images that came up. And so we're going to look at some of the race issues and how the, you know, deep state cabal system, whatever you want to say, how they pit us against one another in these different people movements. And so I wanted to start off with Acts 17:26-28, just to set the tone, because we're not here lifting up or putting down any culture or race or anything, because we're all one. And so the scriptures say, from one man, Adam, he made every man and woman and every race of humanity, and he spreads us over all the earth. He sets history. He has done this so that every person would long for God, feel their way to him, and find him, for he is the God who is easy to discover. I love that. It
mhm.
is through him that we live and function and have our identity. So I want
Yeah,
that to be
such a
our
great.
foundation.
Yeah, Acts 17:26 through 28. I like the Passion Translation as well for some of these verses.
Yes. And so when we were together last time, we looked briefly at this mural. And at the time, I didn't know what CRLA, and we were trying to figure out what UFW was.
Hmm.
And so, UFW is the United Farm Workers, and they have that symbol that's in the middle of it. And then the CRLA is there. And so that has an interesting little sigil as well, or logo, whatever you want to call it. So
Hmm.
anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, so it's interesting you see like kind of the imagery that looks kind of like planted fields, but we see the same kind of symbology used in a lot of the Brotherhood symbols where you have the seven sun rays. But what we see there is only six. And we do see a lot in the sigils, that kind of the imagery of the justice scales. And you know, d that's usually associated with, they'll put that as a covering, like we see it in the FBI symbol, where you have that scale kinda used as a header on the 2 pillars that represent the Boaz and the Joachim. So, is there a connection to, the California Rural Legal Assistance and the Brotherhood? That's part of the question. They like to display things in their symbols, so we're, kind of piecing everything together. With the United Farm Workers, too, we see kind of that symbology of the phoenix,
Mhm,
which is often used with the order of the phoenix. It's interesting because the circular elemental usually represents gold. When it has a dot in it, that represents fire. So,
mhm.
is this a way that maybe they're trying to represent that phoenix and fire kind of shyly? Is there a connection to the order of the phoenix? I don't have a positive answer on that, but um, that it very well could be.
Well, and it's interesting you mentioned the 6 rays in the CRLA, logo, but I
Hmm.
also see 6 different types of soil on that mural.
That is
So I'm curious.
interesting, huh?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if you include the mountains, so I don't know if there's any significance to that, but just the number 6. So
Yeah, it's interesting that they are repeating that number.
and so the interesting thing is the brown berets have that same phoenix,
Mhm.
symbolism, and so I don't know if you have anything you wanna add to that.
I really believe that there is a connection with the higher escalons of the Order of the Phoenix, which we know is one of the top three orders in the system. You've got the Order of the Phoenix, the Order of the Golden Dawn, and the Order of Melchizedek. So, we know that there's other military type groups, um, that fall under the system's sovereign military order that interface with different militaries around the world. Whether that's the United Nations or, connected to the galactic uh, military or, um, whether it's to the US military or special groups. Uh, you know, it's just interesting that you have, in our military, we have the Green Berets, which are a special group.
Mhm.
Cesar Chavez was connected to the Brown Berets. Are these just, different sides of the system established in different countries, fighting for territory, power, control? I think that that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and, the next slide I have actually, I think the next 2 slides has to do a lot of these movements came out of California,
Hmm.
and, so the University of California here, I don't know if you wanna comment on these sigils.
I do, yeah. Yeah, because these are very interesting. And again, we have to remember that there's like when we're learning to read the sigils, it's, it. we have to look at what the sigil is being used to communicate. You have some more of the crests are going to be used to communicate, more of quadrant authority. So, you're going to have the grand high priest or priestesses connected with that. You'll have the bloodline families, could be councilmen who are connected to that, and those who are assigned over certain territories. Um, and it could be specific to their family. It could be specific to the kind of their region or their area versus like the city sigils that we read, those are more of a regional jurisdiction. We talk about how, underneath the grand high priest, they're going to be assigned to a quadrant. Within that quadrant, they're going to have high priests and priestesses that they oversee within the region. And then underneath them, it's going to break down to the different departments and the specific brotherhood orders that have authority and, kind of governance within that region. So, what we look at with schools is slightly different because what you get is that the brotherhood begins to define what authority. So not just who, but each department is given different programs, different training that they're going to do. Each of them are going to be skilled in, keeping a part of the system going. So how do they do that? You train men to be like you. You basically are mirroring your position into other people. So as they do that, really what you get into with the schools is that they're going to begin to kind of, you know, symbolize what training, what teaching they're doing.
Mhm.
So as we look at this, the first one, the California state, at the very top, we see that genie um, lamp. And we find that in the book, The Initiates of the Flame, which basically is, the Order of Melchizedek's reflection book. It's what I consider a safe book to read because you're not going to be getting any weird spiritual attachments. You're not going to be learning how to summon anything. It's meant to reflect, to give people information about what they need to know if they're in that order. And most people, unless you're looking for it, trying to discover the truth of what is really happening behind the scenes, you're not going to necessarily get that.
Mhm.
It kind of reads more like a history or um, a book for thought.
Mhm.
So we find that same genie lamp in that book. And what does it represent? It represents the Order of Melchizedek, those who are initiates of the flame. But nothing is by accident. So, notice exactly where it's positioned and how even the light would go into the upper area that we would consider Oregon,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And that light is kind of focused where it doesn't just look like a light. If you turn it sideways, it kind of looks like the eye of Horus.
Yeah.
Um, so, we know in that Oregon area, um, let's quick look at a map and see what um, what cities right there.
Yeah.
Because you have two, like you have it kind of focused at that upper area of California as well as Oregon. And yeah, so interestingly enough, it's kind of, let's see, I don't have an exact. It looks like it's more like, I don't know if they just don't, like you're getting more like into the mountainous kind of
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
But here's one. Okay, so interesting. I don't have the California side, but as you're getting into that area, there's actually part of the highway kind of like breaks in a V shape,
Mhm.
um, kind of symbolizing an eye, but kind of right where I would say that spot is, you have Lakeview or kind of the Klamath Falls area, which
Hmm.
is a huge thoroughway there into Oregon. And then I want to see if we can find, let's see, let's do state of California. So I'm trying to remember which one is like kind of right there in that spot. So it looks like, okay, like if it's more towards like the Klamath Falls area, you've got Mount Shasta, which is you got a huge underground military base there, training center. And then if it goes a little bit more to the side, you have Madeline and Alturas. But my guess is that it's probably pointing out that Mount Shasta training center, um, in that California area, and the connection, that does that military base, you know, go underground between both the California and the
Oh,
Oregon areas.
yeah.
Is
Okay.
this university a supplier of some of the people who are going to be trained up in the order of Melchizedek priesthood, um,
Mhm.
in that area? Um, books are interesting too. Um, just the kind of the short of it is that there are libraries throughout the world that are specialty occultic libraries. So my guess is that, beyond the university, that there's a connection with that Mount Shasta area. And do they have special books there? Probably. Um, you know, and we know with the Brotherhood system that they always will have their mottos in threes. And so we've got, the motto Vox Veritas. What's that last word again?
Vita?
And when we look up in Latin, let's see here what we've got, um, truth, and then Vox Veritas is connected to truth. Let me see if it Vita with a T? Might have put
VITA.
Thank you. Yeah, I did put that in wrong. I was wondering. Okay. So voice, truth, life
Okay.
is what Vox Veritas means. Um, so it's just another way to symbolize that you've got that brotherhood connection, connection to, a military training center, and the type of information that they're going to specialize in. Um, with the other one, the University of California, is this like just the older symbol, or are
I
they
think
the
it's
same
different.
school or separate? I think they are separate too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
I
in that, go ahead.
I think that what she's done is, the next slide, we've got one, the San Diego University of San Diego, and I think each one of these were the birthing place of these people movements.
What you have is that sometimes, like we said, you'll get, um, information that kind of is put out in a map as to how they're operating. And I wanted to find a different map for it, but I believe it's actually the Chateau Armorosa that it's referring to that we're seeing. But so sometimes, these what they'll hide in these school symbols is, where the secret training is in connection to the school. So, some of that symbology can be in books. Um, what, why do they use books in their symbology? Um, because it represents kind of the putting together of words that represent power. And, you know, I'm trying to think of a way to put it into words. But what happens is that within that system, when they're learning how to, deal with secret knowledge, we have to remember that in the old days, all knowledge was, that was considered secret would be passed orally. Like that's the
Mhm.
tradition, that they would go over it orally so much that, those within their groups would know that knowledge. That's why, like the Hebrews, the Israelites, they did not use vowels
Mhm.
because they did not want people who were not in their group to know how to properly pronounce things. That's why even we see into the later centuries, when you had the scribes and those who began to, write the word, they would not even write the name of God.
Mhm.
They would write Jehovah in that place because they didn't want people to know how to properly pronounce to be able to misuse or to be able to access the unlimited power that was available with those words. So we have the same thing within the system is that, they're going to use signs or symbols that are going to communicate a bunch of things to those who know the traditions or where things are stemming from. So, when you look at, you know, some of the stuff they're communicating, when you get books, it can mean there's a secret library. It can mean that there's priestesses who are connected to that temple to kind of guard those books. It could mean that you've got somebody who's specialized in making what they consider living books. Um, so there's so much that they are communicating. And sometimes, you literally are seeing a map. They're identifying a place or a location with it and what you can find at that place or location if you discover the truth. So what's interesting is that, the way they've laid out the book on this one is that you end up with two pillars. Okay.
Mm.
You've got the Joachim on, or the Boaz and the Joachim.
Mhm.
At the top, they've kind of laid out that star as though it's a header. Um, and what's at the forefront, what's the capstone of that? We know from the initiates of the flame that the star is representative of the brotherhood
Mhm.
system. But in that, there's much, much more. The ribbons for them represent their contracts with spiritual beings.
Mm.
The white ribbon is going to be a contract with Lucifer himself because, they consider him the great white light.
Mhm.
Um, so when there's, when it's proclaiming, let there be light, whose light are they really proclaiming in a certain place? It's Lucifer's light,
Wow.
and that's also that ribbon can represent, their flag, which, their motto is in this sign we shall conquer.
Mhm.
Um, so, but here I think they're indicating as well, we see just a random boxed in perfectly squared A, you know,
Yes.
and with the brotherhood, everything is perfectly squared because you got to have the right degrees and angles to get where you need to go, right? If I were looking at that as a map of, that they're indicating a specific place where people can go for rituals that are going to be connected to this school, I would say that it was, you know, near the Castle Armorosa. Um, that would be my educated um, assessment of that. Now, what's even more interesting is that at the bottom, I think it's supposed to look like a blue ribbon that kind of is folded over, and then you see the year. But the way that that ribbon is kind of folded over, I don't know about to you, but to me, it kind of looks like two missiles hanging out there.
It does, yeah.
So how far is that University of California from a very specific submarine base that's near the Palisades area? I think that, there's a connection in the training to that military base as well. So, um, just kind of interesting some of the different things that we can get. And, you've got that deep dark blue. I don't know if to some maybe it looks more like a purple, dark purple color. And then around the edges, you have what looks like pearls, which we know that, within the system, that's one of the ways that the elite women in the Order of Melchizedek will display that they're part of the Order of Melchizedek. They'll wear the purple with the pearls.
Mm.
Um, So my guess is if you attend the University of California, you're going to have quite a few female elite teachers, who are part of that order of Melchizedek, that they're going to be focused on raising up more of the elite women who are going to be highly involved in some of the different society things.
Wow, wow, wow. All right. And next we go to San Diego University, State University.
Yeah, that's just a whole bunch of fun, isn't it? um, What's interesting with that is, you do let's start with the sigil of that school. We talked about with some of the other ones where you get more of kind of that Aztec or Inca type feel in the building structures.
Mhm,
The part that they're displaying here, you know, in that sigil, you see very clearly how it looks like you've got the two towers representing the two pillars, the Joas and the Boacan. And then for the header, you have more of that Aztecan kind of feel, which, what is that going to draw our attention to? It's going to draw our attention that, you know, you're going to most likely have more of the Order of the Phoenix at the highest order in that, but you're also going to have a connection with um, Odinism
mhm,
in that. Now, behind that, you do have other groups that we've talked about a little bit that can also be kind of behind the scenes, and you're going to get, the Order of the Red Men, um, some of those different symbologies there as well. Now, we see, in the San Diego State um, flag there, we also see the spear.
mhm.
Um, it's interesting that the spear just so happens to be in a D and you've got this S going through it. Um, you'll see it's interesting that in the Initiates of the Flame, they have kind of what you would consider like a vase,
Mhm.
and there's a snake that wraps around that representing the seed of Satan.
Wow.
So what's interesting is that, you see this sphere through a D. Is it really representing Odinism and, um, usually that's going to be the spearhead that represents that. But here we have the whole sphere with the D, which could represent the spear of destiny. And
Oh, yeah.
then you have the S or the snake, the seed of Cain wrapped through it.
Wow.
Um, so all the little hidden things, um, you know, is that what it's representing? It's very plausible with that. Um, in the architecture too, they're going to, based on how the buildings are used, um, they're going to build it according to its use and purpose in the system. So, what we see a lot in that is the chalice symbol,
Mhm.
the cup, and, is that a place then where, you know, we're going to see, what were the Inca and the temples, Aztec temples used for the most? You had blood ritual sacrifice. So is that a place where, they're having sacrifices? What was Cain's major sin? Killing his brother.
Mhm.
Uh, what happened with the spear of destiny that Christ was pierced in the side.
Yeah.
Um, so is that a place of ritual? Is it a place of gladiator games where you're going to have brothers fighting brothers and somebody in the end drinks the cup? Um, we'd have to see what's underground to figure out for sure.
Wow. 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 Very, very interesting. All right. Now we're moving to the Panther movement, Black Power, Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, so there's a lot here that, you know, is connected to secret societies, especially what the system considers the Black nobility. So, with that, you'll see a lot of connections between the Black Panther parties, the Black Power parties, Black Lives Matters, and, um, those that are from those races who are, also fighting and contending for their brotherhood rights. Um, I think I'll just leave it there
Okay.
um, for now, but
All
there's a
right.
lot there.
And then this is the American Indian movement.
Yeah. So with that, we get, I think a lot of it is to, like, when we look at flags, they're always going to be establishing contracts and connections together. Um, what do they want you to believe that represents? They want you to believe that it represents Native American with, um, you know, bringing together of the white, the gold, the black. But, in the system, all of those are different things. They represent
Mhm.
alliances in the spirit world. And, it's interesting because, we talk about how the Brotherhood has so extensively put so many orders, so many secret societies, so many associations and foundations. They want everybody to believe that each thing is separate and its own, but really there's a joining together, um, a connection between everything.
Oh,
So, here with the American Indian movement, we see just on the guy's jacket there, that's the name of the secret society, the Warrior Society. What I find more interesting is that, we know that, the Native American head in the middle that could be representative both of the Order of Odin or the Order of the Red Man. It also could bring together, you have a couple other groups. You have the Order of the White Buffalo, which is
mhm.
interesting that they have the Native American head on their flag, right on those white ribbons and the gold ribbon. Now, the gold and the brown usually together represent something else, and you know, different contracts. But in this, we also see, you know, what's supposed to look like Native American feathers, but to me, it really looks like a hand,
Yeah.
kind of doing this
Yeah.
sideways thing like this, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, what does that symbolize in the system? Especially when it's tilted to the side, that usually represents, two male escorts.
Huh.
So is this really, you know, where, it's more than what it looks like? Are they connected with law enforcement? Um, my guess is it would be on the reservations. The gold and yellow are going to be connected to very specific form of law enforcement.
Mm.
But are they operating on the reservations through these societies, moving, um, assets and part of that transportation?
Wow.
So it it can represent different things. Um, you know, it's just a matter of learning how these different groups are operating within their region and their departments. But I would propose that there's probably alliances there between the warrior society, the American Indian movement, and um, law enforcement through
Oh,
specific groups.
wow. Wow. Very, very interesting. And I just, this came up in my feed today. And, I just think it's the kind of the bigger picture, the plan. And this is Henry Kissinger in an address to the Bilderberg meeting in France in 1992. Today, Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there is an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all people of the world will pledge with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well being granted to be them by their world government. And so just thinking about what's all going on with our borders and different things and how they pit races, against each
Mhm.
other and all of this to create that fear, of the unknown of what's happening. And anyway, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, it's interesting that, within the system, they would consider that willing consent.
Mhm.
Um, in the 80s, they talked a lot about how, people really want to feel safe. They want to feel like their morals and their ethics are protected. And, they want to feel like good people. So if you can present things in a way that applies to their morals and ethics, they're more willing to go along with it. Um, no matter, you know, you don't have to force people to make the choice; they willingly will make it.
Mhm.
So this, it became a huge push that we see. I brought out even in Michael Aquino's war manuals in his trilogy there where, their plan focused on first, um, you know, getting people to physically comply.
Mhm.
Then the second book focuses on the spiritual compliance, and the third on, the will, the
Mhm.
transformation of the will. And, they do that through suggestion.
Yeah.
We saw that with, the big, we'll just say with the mass stuff that went out. They said that, like there were things kind of going out that, oh, well, good people, you know, you'll distance yourself to protect others.
Yeah.
You'll follow the lines because that's protecting the employees at the store you go to, or your kids are sitting in school. Not only are they going to wear a mask, but let's put up shields now, barriers, because we want everybody to have their safe space. So they begin to use words that make us feel safe, But in that, do any of us really feel safe?
Mm.
No, because really what they're doing is they're feeding us a lie. There's still danger involved in the situation, and we know somewhere within that danger, you know, it's gonna have a kickback,
Mhm.
and we're just expecting that, but we don't know what it is. And when you hear of all the fear, right now it's the fear about the border that
Mhm.
we've got all these men of age coming in who are able to fight, who are able to make war. But the truth is that they're not just coming in now. That's just the show.
Yeah.
They've been here. How many underground bases do we have within the United States? Um, and I would propose that it's much worse, that their ideology is not just to have us be afraid of this army,
Mhm.
um, you know, that they're going to be sacrificing some of those men. That's some of their rituals. So they're literally bringing in, um, what they need to keep going. And why is that? It's because they've lost some of their sacrifices.
Mm.
So they're going to bring them in, parade them in front of our face, make it look like they're the heroes when all of a sudden it disappears and it's no longer a problem. But who's asking, well, where did they go? Did they really get sent back to their country? Is their country really dealing with them, or did something worse happen? Has there been mass sacrifices, on our land, um, underground, in tunnels, under our buildings? You know, are there worse things happening with those men? Um, you know, because I guess I just look at the whole picture, and, I'll try to keep it sensitive here, but, we look at things like food shortage and stuff like that. So when that problem gets solved, really, how did it get solved? That's what I'm asking
Mhm.
is, are there more nefarious things going on? They give us a choice, bugs or something else, but we don't know what the something else is. It's not defined. Are we going to willingly just accept that's the way things are? When are we going to rise up and hold to account and say, hey, we want an account, we want documentation? If really there was, you know, over 18 million people coming into our country, we want to know that all those people went back, and we want, to see the documentation for that. We want to know that they weren't sacrificed, or worse, and I don't think it's wrong to ask.
Yeah.
We need a government that's going to be, um, accountable,
Mhm.
that is going to choose to do what's right, that's going to choose to honor us and our values and what we believe. The basics of our values is that every human has life, every human has constitutional rights,
Yeah.
um, God-given rights. And are we upholding those even in matters of justice, such as, you know, returning these illegal immigrants to their own country?
Mhm.
That's an honorable thing that we follow through with what we say we're going to do,
Yeah.
you know? I mean, I wanna know. I
Yeah.
wanna know from Mexico, Guatemala, the Congo. How many of your people do you assume came over here, and how many are we sending back?
Wow. Yeah.
Out of 18 million people, if they're each getting like 4 or 5, right?
Mhm.
Well, there's a huge discrepancy there. What happened to the millions?
Well, it's kind of ironic that the IRS wants to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row of, our income and everything, and they're gonna audit us, to check out if there's any irregularities, but something as important as humans, um, it's hard to get records of what's actually happening.
Right.
Even I
Right.
think with the children, missing children, they don't have an accurate, count, and it's like, of all things, that's our most precious resource.
They don't even know who's missing. How do
Yeah.
you not know a child's name? How do you not it's like you have a valued possession and I mean, I'm sure they're diamonds, they're pearls, they're jewels, they're gold coins, they're silver. You're right, they have an accurate account of all those things, but yet our most precious assets, children, um, you know, they lose track of that,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know?
Uh,
Incompetence. That's what we would say, incompetence and ignorance, outright, fools.
yeah. So it's kind of interesting what we looked at today in reference to, out of these schools came these movements, to really divide us racially, to incite fear and, this divisiveness. Do you think most of the people who started those movements, are in the system?
I do,
Yeah.
yeah. Or
And
we're fighting against it. You do have some where I would say, they were fighting against the system.
okay. Oh, is it light side, dark side, or just fighting against the system, do you think?
I think there's a few that not ones that we talked about today, but I think that there's a few that definitely could be we're just outright, fighting against the system, but
But we wanna look at hope because that's why we're here, is to bring hope, and so it can when we share these things, it can be discouraging and go, "Oh my goodness," "the the world's terrible, everything's bad, and, what are we gonna do? Oh my." But, the truth is that, the Lord reigns above all of
mhm,
this, and He's got a plan of restoration. And so we don't wanna be blind to these things, and so I so appreciate, Jesse, what you bring, is like, "Okay, this is going on. This is what's
mhm.
happening in our educational system that's going into culture and is connected to the military and connected to brotherhood and all of these kinds of things." Um, but where is our hope and what can we do as Christians?
Yeah, I think, the what is the main purpose in knowing that information is that, that for us can become prayer strategy. If we know where things are going on, if we know how or people are being used through those things, that gives us knowledge to be able to pray.
Mhm.
Pray for the students in the universities, pray for the kids in the schools, pray for these societies when you see the symbols going up, that they would know and hear the truth. And there's a beautiful verse in scripture that I love. It's in Isaiah 19:25. And all throughout scripture, you see, this distinguishing between nations. You see a lot of the Lord's wrath and anger because of their idolatry, their wickedness, their sin. But in this verse, you really see the Lord's heart for those nations in spite of those things. And he says, "Blessed be Egypt, my people,
Mm.
Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance."
Wow, I love that.
So, to think that the Lord, he calls Egypt his people, he calls Assyria, you know, that Assyria actually was the nation of Nineveh.
Mm.
And, we've heard a lot about Nineveh recently. People are talking about, the signs and the stars and sky that are coming up that we're going to see, and how, that some things represent Nineveh with the cities that it's going to cross over and stuff. Why would God point out Nineveh, who later became the nation of Assyria? Nineveh was the one nation that had the greatest revival
Yes.
of all times. God sent Jonah to go, take to take a warning, a prophecy there. And Jonah fought the Lord and said, well, no, because I know they'll turn away and then you'll recant and, but in his struggle, finally he goes and things do happen. The king, everybody, the entire nation repented and turned to the Lord. Um, and we see that for many centuries where, they all were following the ways of the Lord. And then you see as there's a transition there that just like Israel, they fall back into sin. And that's how, you get the nation of Assyria. Yet the Lord still calls them the work of his hands, that he forms, he fashions, he molds. And that always takes me back to that verse where he talks about that, um, before you were born, while you were in your mother's womb, I knew you and I called you and I appointed you to go to the nations, you know, and that's really the Lord's cry for every nation is that, you know, that as witnesses of his great works and his miracles, that we would share the things that we experience from the Lord with every nation, every tribe, every tongue. Um, in Revelations, he says that by his blood he purchased every nation, every tribe, every tongue, every people to be a kingdom of priests. We're all called to that priesthood to serve the Lord. And so that's really his heart's cry for each and every one of us.
I so love that, and it gives us, that perspective of, when we can have the heart of the Lord for every culture and every race and every nation and understand that, I personally believe God's deposited special gifts and treasure, in each race and each culture and each nation.
Yeah.
And that, when we're able to love one another and come together, there's so much that we all can gain from together. So that's so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Well, amazing, amazing conversation today.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jessie. And would you like to close us out in prayer?
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, I thank you for revealing your heart to us. I thank you for your love that knows no height, no depth, no bounds. Um, I just lift up everybody listening today, Father, and I ask that you would help us to make sense of these things. Help us to know your heart more. Let us not withhold your love from others. Um, Let us not discriminate by race, by color, um, by culture. Lord, let us be those that bring the good news wherever we go. Let us be those that heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, and cast out demons, and do greater than these miracles. Let us be those that raise up disciples of all nations and all people groups, Lord. Um, Give us the wisdom, the knowledge, the understanding, the strength, the counsel, um, and the fear of the Lord to do these things. We ask this in your powerful name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Jessie, and looking forward to having you out here the end of this
Yes.
month, March, and hope many of you can join us. So just encourage you to go to kingdomlivingwithjessie.com and sign up for any events that you can come. Just ask the Lord where you're meant to be, and we look forward to seeing you then. So, all right, we'll see you next time on Testimony Mountain.